The late Christopher Hitchens was a great many things, but a gambler wasn't one of them. A superb wit, to be sure, an equal opportunity gallant, without question, a deep reader, a leading critic, a talk show regular, a swashbuckling journalist. He was all these things, but a gambler he was not. Hitchens was a marvelous aphorist, too, and a rigorous, some might even say natural, partisan. On television, alternately pugnacious and demure.
My question is to Christopher is how you can justify wanting to take something away from people, from 95, that gives meaning to 95% of the American people.
Well, what an incredibly stupid question. First, I've said repeatedly that this stuff cannot be taken away from people. It is their favorite toy, and it will remain so as Freud said in The Future of an Illusion, it will remain that way as long as we're afraid of death and have no problem, which is, I think, likely to be quite a long time. Second, I hope I've made it clear that I'm perfectly happy for people to have these toys.
Hitchens was also something of a handsome devil, suave, showmanly, occasionally dripping with scotch, or was it mere charisma? He was a revolutionary spirit who evinced a taste for the old-fashioned. A gentleman on the make with a broad set of trenchant, if acquired, tastes. But a gambler he was not. Despite the sweeping assertion he made in the face of esophageal cancer, all of life is a wager, in person, Hitchens was thrifty, calculated, and wanted value for his money. In his writing and speaking, he likewise delivered surplus value to his readers and audiences. He wanted them to get the commensurate bang for their buck. Yet, if Hitchens continues to be revered a decade after his death, it must be because he was able to convert his moral compass, his talents, his experience, and his insights into a persona precisely suited for that deliverance. He made intellectual debate feel like a bonanza of pure Freudian id. Hitchens' writing and speaking had the effect of making things feel like they mattered again in public discourse. He swept away our apathy with a glint in the eye, a curl of the lip, and page after page of quickened prose. Hitchens' intellection was performative, a key to his savvy genius. He made rationality, again, feel romantic. It was the totality of his person that made this possible. And as exemplified in his memoir, Hitch 22, there was a method to his mercurialism. Hitchens knew what he was about and never counted on the luck of the draw. So why does Hitchens matter 10 years after his death? For reasons less obvious than one might think. A longtime friend, novelist Ian McEwan, once wrote, "If Hitchens didn't exist, we wouldn't be able to invent him." 10 years after Hitchens' passing, there are many of us who still react to current events with a burning desire to know, WWHD, what would Hitchens do? What profound and pithy punchline would Hitchens have summoned from the annals of human civilization? What choice rebuttal, delivered in his plummy baritone, would have scuttled the paltry prating of cable news pundits, would have pierced the flimsy carapace of his feckless foes, winning glory and VF style points for his side? Embedded, embroiled, embattled. These are a few exemplary Hitchens verbs. And so, at the grim anniversary of Hitchens' death, and his bodily return to the vast continuum of cosmological space-time and stardust, the moment begs us to ask, what would Hitchens have made of the election of Donald Trump? Or his malicious bungling of the COVID-19 response? Or the Me Too movement? Or the Capitol riots? Or Jordan Peterson? Or Black Lives Matter? What jarringly irresistible utterance might have helped us put the past 5 or 10 years into useful perspective? Tantalizingly, Hitchens' own bright star was just beginning its ascent when abruptly he left the scene. Although the timeline of great authors dying at or just before their prime is woefully extensive, few public intellectuals in history have mustered the heady cocktail of gravitas, gumption, and grit that Hitchens did. For many years, as he established a journalism career and moved stateside, Hitchens seemed like a wandering Isaiah, divining the future of the West from a morass of false idols. In two of the greatest books in that magnificent decade of writing preceding his death, Why Orwell Matters and God Is Not Great, Hitchens finally seemed to have discovered his true subject, the song, if you will, worthy of so great a singer.
Okay, let me see. I don't think it's going to take 10 minutes to disprove the existence of God. The atheist proposition is the following. Most of the time, it may not be said that there is no God. It may be said that there is no reason to think that there is one.
In my view, though his political and metaphysical views were consequential and undoubtedly swayed public discourse, in the end, years after his death, it matters less whether Hitchens was right or wrong about the Iraq War, about the existence of God, or the culpability of Mother Teresa, though the quality of those pronouncements have important consequences that need to be placed in the balance. What matters more is that Hitchens showed us, almost single-handedly, an ideal for how public intellectual engagement and debate should take place. With gusto and passion, marshalling facts and evincing ferocity on behalf of a line of argumentation, while refraining, mostly, from building an argument on the shifting sands of ad hominem attacks. Hitchens used ad hominem, but as an ornamentation, and did not confuse it with the precious metals required to forge a true argument. Hitchens was a drinking man, yes. Perhaps even a drinking man's drinking man, but not a wastrel, not a thrill jockey, not a gambler, nor a macaroni, though aspects of these personae were in his public arsenal. Hitchens was likewise a thinking man's thinking man. Not an airy theorist, but a man of action, he thought his way back down to the marrow of life. He was our public intellectual par excellence, and every phrase he uttered was a celebration of the forgotten treasures of the English language, and they arrived with a sense of occasion. Trained in economics and philosophy, he cut his teeth as a soixante-huitard and came to public consciousness as the bard of humanism. How would Hitchens, a few steps closer to his 70s, have responded to the startling rise of Bernie Sanders in 2015? Or to the withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021? We are left to wonder in his wake, and wonder we must, not only to honor the man, but to remind ourselves of our own capacity for boldness and moral courage in the face of, among other things, pride and prejudice, idiocy and malice. When Hitchens famously upset Pascal's wager in his 2007 book, God Is Not Great, it was with the gloating determination that God had not provided enough evidence to believe in his existence. When he pissed off the intellectual left with his support for Bush's war in Iraq, he took as his justification the liberation of the Kurds and the deliverance of a menacing dictator. Hitchens' famous flair for flair earned him as many intellectual admirers as antagonists, and in his penultimate column for Vanity Fair, he went big, wagering against the claim Nietzsche canonized in his Twilight of the Idols. Was mich nicht umbringt, macht mich stärker. What does not kill me makes me stronger. This was sometime a paradox, but now the time gives it proof. 10 years on, we owe it to ourselves to reflect on the quality and the temperament of a man's life and to ask ourselves, what are we missing? How are we the poorer for his absence? What about him would be uncreatable, in other words, if he hadn't existed to set the model and fill the mold? To me, Christopher Hitchens matters less for the timeliness of his ideas, but for the timelessness with which he expressed them. It was his willingness to live life on the public stage, his conviction that great ideas must be debated in the public square, that history is shaped not merely by those ideas, but by the men and women who deliver them and give them voice, embodied, charismatic, learned people. That this flesh and blood, voiced and vigorous approach to public intellectual discourse is what most needs to be rejuvenated each decade, and it is precisely this quality that makes for Christopher Hitchens' most enduring legacy. Hi, my name is Alan Guy Wilcox. I'm one of the co-founders of Times Arrow. To enjoy more literary content like this, make sure to click the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and visit us at timesarrow.org.